Hello, and welcome to show number 2532 of Eyes on Success, a weekly program empowering the visually impaired with expert advice, personal stories, and the latest in technology and accessibility. I'm Nancy Goodman-Torpy.
And I'm Pete Torpy.
I had no idea what to expect. This has been fascinating. Thank you so much. I mean, it's just a little block of plastic. I started playing with it 45 years ago. Who would have thought? This has been great. Thank you so much, Paul.
You're very welcome. And it surprised me just as much when I launched in on this book project, the incredible entire world that this subculture now is. Quite incredible.
And as they both said, this really was an eye-opener about the Rubik's Cube and how much fun it can be.
We'll talk with Paul Martz, author of the recently published book, Solve It, the only speed-solving guide for blind cubers. Paul, who is blind, describes how he uses textures, memory skills, and blazing speed to participate in timed challenges against blind and sighted participants in solving Rubik's Cubes. But first for our tip of the week. This week's tip comes from Paul Martz.
A couple of months ago, you had an R&B musician named Rod as a guest. And Rod said it's important to find something that you enjoy doing and do it every day. And I want to echo that. For so many of us, blindness is a huge challenge. It's a source of anxiety and even depression. The way that I cope with that is I do things that I enjoy doing. It could be listening to music that I haven't heard in a long time, or reading an audiobook, or going out for coffee with a friend. Even if it's just a long, hot shower in the morning, just do something that gives you pleasure. Just because you can't see doesn't mean you can't find something enjoyable to do.
Support for Eyes on Success is provided by
First Aid for the Blind, teaching blind and vision-impaired clients important life skills through live video training from blind instructors. The purpose of FAFTB's training is to replace the fear of the unknown with feelings of hope and confidence. More information is at faftb.com.
And by
Biped AI, the manufacturer of NOAA, an all-in-one mobility vest. NOAA provides GPS navigation, detects obstacles, and describes surroundings using cameras and AI. Available through many distributors. More information is available at biped.ai.
You are listening to Eyes on Success. Success, 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 success.
Let's start by meeting Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Martz. I am a science fiction author, a tech writer, a retired computer programmer, former punk rock drummer, and I'm a blind speed cuber, and I have recently published a new book, Solve It, the only speed-solving guide for blind cubers.
And we'll be talking about that in just a bit. I assume you've been blind for a fairly long time? What kind of vision do you have?
I have X-linked retinitis pigmentosa, which is prevalent in my family tree. For that reason, my mom, who also has RP, was able to notice my fairly mild symptoms at an early age and know right off the bat what it was. And getting a diagnosis was straightforward. I was diagnosed at age 13.
And how much vision do you have left now?
I consider myself totally blind, though I do have some light perception. That's become a lot less reliable lately. I feel like that light perception ability is something that I'm losing rapidly.
Support for Eyes on Success comes from our listeners and corporate sponsors.
For more information about airing promotional items on the show, send an email to hosts@eyesonsuccess.net.
This week's focus topic is the Rubik's Cube. What it is, how it's made, how you work it, and how some people are able to solve it incredibly fast.
In the introduction, you talked about your journey through various degrees of vision loss. It sounds like you saw reasonably well when you were a child, as I did. And I'm guessing that's when you got interested in the Rubik's Cube?
Yeah, I was a 17-year-old puzzle nut when the Rubik's Cube was introduced in the U.S. in 1980. And probably became interested in puzzles from my mom, who always seemed to have a jigsaw puzzle going or was doing a crossword or a word search. I definitely bought a Rubik's Cube as soon as I could crack open my piggy bank and get my hands on one. And at the time, this was 1980, you remember there was no internet. There weren't even any published guides when the cube first came out. But along with some of my motivated friends in school, we started making our own notes and sharing our own notes, and pretty soon we had came up with our own solution. So it was just a real challenge. We spent weeks on it, banging our heads against this puzzle and cracking the code, and yeah, we did it. Fortunately, the internet now exists, and no one has to pioneer their own solution anymore. The problem, though, if you've lost your eyesight and if you're blind, is a lot of those resources online are visual in nature. They're videos that tell you things like, you see this here? Just turn it like this and move it over there, which is not helpful if you're blind. And if it's a web page that you're referencing, it often contains images and diagrams that are of no help.
As you just mentioned, the Rubik's Cube was introduced in this country 45 years ago and worldwide pretty soon after that. For anybody who's managed to live this long without seeing one, can you describe what the Rubik's Cube is?
It's a cube with 6 sides. It fits in the palm of your hands, about 2, maybe 2.5 inches length, width, and height. And each side has a unique color when the cube is solved. But the cube is divided up into 9 individual pieces on each of its 6 sides. And those sides can turn. And as you turn them, those 9 individual pieces with their initially matching colors will become increasingly scrambled and not match. And the goal of the cube, as a sighted person, is to figure out a sequence of turns to restore that cube to its solved state so that you once again have those 6 colors all on 6 sides.
So my experience is you can turn one layer relative to the other 2 at a time, right?
That's correct.
And then you rotate the cube and the layers are facing in a different direction relative to the rest of the cube.
Yes, that's correct. Each side has a name. Left, right, front, back, up, down. And when you turn a side, you're actually turning 1/3 of that cube relative to the rest of the cube.
Now, these colors, as you described your current vision state, aren't doing you any good. How have they modified the cube so you can work with it?
Well, each of those 9 individual little pieces on a side, you're going to need some kind of tactile marking on them. So blind people all use bump dots around the house to mark the start button on their microwave or controls on a washing machine and dryer. And if you've got 9 that match, then you've got enough to mark one side of your cube. Now, you don't need to mark all 6 sides of your cube. You can leave one of them blank, but you're still going to need 45 individual bump dots, and 9 have to match of 5 different unique shapes that you'll be able to tell apart. And then you've got a tactile cube that you can solve by touch.
I thought they marketed Rubik's Cubes with raised shapes on them. So one color is a triangle and one's a circle. Do those not exist?
Yes. you can actually purchase a tactile cube that is pre-made with textures and tactile markings on it. There is a new store that's just came online called texturecube.com, and I'll mention that at the end as well, that creates a handmade high-end Rubik's Cube designed for speed solving with custom markings on it. That doesn't quite solve all of our problems, though. If you're a sighted cuber solving the standard 6-color cube, those colors are arranged in a standard ordering. You will always find blue opposite green, red opposite orange, and white opposite yellow. And if you happen to have a cube where it doesn't follow those orderings, it's going to throw you off and slow you down. Unfortunately, there is no standard for tactile markings for blind cubers. So the way I deal with that is I find a tactile marking solution and scheme that works for me, and I stick with it.
Why does it matter what order the colors are in? Why would that make it harder or even different to solve?
It would be as if you were a classically trained piano player and you sat down at a piano where the white keys and black keys were switched.
But if they just change the color, a C is still a C.
I'm thinking suddenly the white keys are up where the black keys are and the black keys are down where the white keys are. You wouldn't be able to play it anymore.
If they switch the notes around.
Right? When you're a high-end speed cuber, that change in colors will make you question those moves that you're about to do. And that small amount of questioning will slow you down and cost you in a competition.
Now, when I was young playing with Rubik's Cubes, I don't think anybody ever had formal competitions. Maybe, with another kid, we had a competition, but I understand there are real competitions these days. Tell us about those.
I'll start by saying I did not begin competitively solving until I was 60 years old. So this has been going on, I think I first heard about it in the early 80s, and I thought, well, why would I want to speed solve? I've already figured out a solution on my own. Isn't that the whole point of the cube? But no, the point of the cube now is how fast can you solve it? And an entire subculture has grown up around this. It's a primarily volunteer-run organization, and they host competitions all around the globe. They track records in a database. I live in Colorado, and I'm very fortunate to have a very strong and vibrant speed-solving community here. On any given month, somewhere in the state, I can go to a competition. It's attended by about 80 or 90 people. I will tell you that the primary demographic is teenage boys, but within the Colorado speed cubing community, a small conglomerate of senior cubers, including myself, all kind of sit together and cheer each other on as we solve.
Never having been to one of these competitions, I'm curious what all happens at one of these competitions.
Let me explain how the competition works. You go to a solving station when it's your turn, when you're called up. There's a timer in front of you that can be activated with touchpads to both start the timer and stop the timer. A judge brings you your scrambled cube, and you tell them when you're ready. They lift the cover. For me as a blind cuber, I then grab that cube and start examining it with my fingers. This is called the inspection period. You're given 15 seconds to inspect the cube. Then you have to sit it down and start the timer with your fingertips on the touchpads before those 15 seconds are up. Once the timer's started, pick up the cube, solve it as fast as possible, drop it, and slam your hands back down on the touchpad. You get 5 solves. They throw away your best and your worst, and they average the remaining 3. And that's your score.
And how long does it typically take you to solve a Rubik's Cube?
I am a blind 62-year-old man, and those are 2 marks against me right there. In spite of that, I have gotten under a minute, 10 seconds a couple of times.
Wow.
When I'm in a competition with a judge breathing down my neck, it's not as easy. My best time, official time, is a minute 39.
So you said being over 20 and blind are both disadvantages. How fast do some of these teenagers who can see solve them?
The World Rubik's Cube Speed Solving Championship was just this past July 4th weekend. There were close to 2,000 competitors, and nearly every one of them was solving under a minute. The top solvers, top three solvers, first, second, and third place, had averages that were under 5 seconds.
Under 5 seconds?
Yes.
Is that even physically possible?
For those three people, it is.
That's amazing. That is just amazing. That takes so much practice. Well, I looked it up, and the current world champion is Yuhang Wang from China, who just solved a Rubik's Cube in 3.08 seconds, beating his previous record of 3 point something else seconds. He's 11.
You talked about having to do the Rubik's Cube 5 times in a row. I guess this is because how it's randomized can affect how fast you can put it back together again.
That's correct. When people compete against one another, the person you're competing against has the same scramble as you, but neither of you get to see it in advance, of course. But over the course of your 5 solves that you do, each of those 5 solves has a different scramble. And yes, some are going to be a little bit easier than other. Maybe that first step goes just a bit quicker with that second scramble than it did with the first. Or maybe that fourth scramble, I get to the final step and, it's one of the easy ones. It's only, an 8 mover instead of a 12 mover. And that gives you just that little bit of an edge. So taking the average score, I believe, is a very fair way to rank the competitors.
So the logic behind the way they work the competitions is pretty much the same concept as how people play duplicate bridge, where East gets the same cards at each table, but then the next hand, they're not the same as the last hand.
That sounds right. Wow, that's neat. I'm an old bridge player. I gave it up a few years ago, but I didn't know that they shuffled the deck the same way. That's pretty neat.
Oh, they don't shuffle them. Someone sits in the back room and puts them all in the same order.
Now, if you see a Rubik's Cube for the first time and you want to reorganize the colors to make it all back in its original position, that can be quite a daunting task. But you've put together a book that can be followed by blind people to help you solve the Rubik's Cube. Tell us a little bit about the book.
I did. As my eyesight became increasingly non-functional, I switched over to solving a standard colored cube to a tactile cube. And at that time, I needed to kind of refresh my memory a little bit because I hadn't solved a cube for a while. So I started looking online and wow, there's all these great resources out there. And I immediately noticed a lot of them were very visual in nature. I'll just say all of them were visual. At that time, I had enough low vision left to refresh my memory, but I started making notes to myself in text that worked with a screen reader so that I wouldn't have to deal with this problem going forward. And over time, those text-based notes began to grow into the book that I've now recently published. So I start out by explaining the cube and all of its parts, and I provide a beginner's solution. Then I go into part 2 of the book where I explain how the competitions work and how to time your solves, and I lay out the overview of a much faster solution. And then finally, the book concludes with a few neat little tricks so you can turn your cube into checkerboard patterns with just a few quick turns, plus signs on one side, minus signs on the other. These are all patterns that you can make with the different colors or different tactile shapes. And I also explain how to completely disassemble, clean, and reassemble your cube, which is almost as much fun as solving it.
Oh, you mean to take the entire cube apart
Yep.
and get into its inside and straighten it out?
It's a lot of fun, yeah, when you see how this thing works inside, yeah.
Well, that raises an interesting question because I dabbled with a Rubik's Cube. Who didn't, right? And I never understood how they assemble this thing so that, as we discussed earlier, you can rotate it in any direction and then take one layer and rotate that relative to the rest. And it never falls apart and it doesn't get tangled up. How are they put together so that that's even possible?
Well, I believe Erno Rubik was at least a designer. If I'm not mistaken, he was a mechanical engineer. And he came up with the idea that it could be cube-shaped on the outside, but it could be a hollow sphere on the inside. So each of these individual pieces of the Rubik's Cube, there are 26 of them total to make up this cube shape. They all have little nibs on the inside that interlock with each other and flow around the inside of what is basically a hollow ball.
Huh. Amazing. So this is a great toy, puzzle, challenge, mechanical marvel for lots of people. Did you know that it had been inducted into the National Toy Hall of Fame?
I did not, but if any toy deserves it, it's the Rubik's Cube because it is a classic puzzle that took popular culture by storm. And I'm just glad that they make tactile cubes now. And I've put this book out to fill what I saw as a documentation hole because blind people need a tactile cube, but they also need the instructions so that they can solve it. I'm glad to be a part of this.
Sounds like a fun toy to play with for everybody.
I think every blind person should play with one. We use our memory and our tactile sensitivity skills every day, and a tactile Rubik's Cube is only going to exercise those skills further. If you've got a set of instructions and a tactile cube gathering dust somewhere, it's time to pick it up, blow off the dust, and solve that Rubik's Cube.
You are listening to Eyes on Success. Success, 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 success.
Now for this week's final item, how to learn more about Paul Martz's new book, how to get it, and how to contact the author.
Well, Paul, maybe you can remind us what the name of your book is and tell people where they can obtain your book.
The book is called Solve It with an exclamation mark. Solve It, exclamation mark. The only speed solving guide for blind cubers. If you're a member of the Bookshare program, you can find it for free in their catalog. If you'd like to purchase the book, it's marked down to $2 through the month of August from a variety of booksellers. It's $3 from Amazon. But you'll want to go to my webpage, paulmartz.com, paulmartz.com, to find a buy link. The resource that I mentioned earlier, where you can buy a high-end speed cube already handmade with custom tactile markings, that's texturecube.com.
And if people had questions for you, is there a way they can contact you?
If you go to my webpage, paulmartz.com, you can send me an email on the contact form.
So we are also in Colorado, and you said there's, 10 or 20 competitions in the state a year. Where do you find them?
You can go to worldcubeassociation.org and in the search box type in Colorado, and it will tell you what events are coming up. There's one August 11th in Commerce City.
It turns out that many competitions have a blindfolded section, which should be a good option for blind cubers.
And I noticed there is quite an active thread on the AppleVis website about the Rubik's Cube.
That's right. Been some discussion on applevis.com. Another place where this book has drawn a lot of attention is audiogames.net. So I'm glad to see that there is a community of people that are interested in doing it, that I'm not some outlier oddball, which I feel like sometimes, but because the Rubik's Cube is kind of a niche market, but it shouldn't be. It's a lot of fun. Everyone should solve it.
One last thing. When our speech synthesizers talk about Rubik's Cubes, they don't often tell us the spelling. And if people want to Google it for themselves, tell us how it's actually spelled.
The official trademark is a capital R-U-B-I-K apostrophe S space capital C-U-B-E.
But I do have another question. You talked about purchasing a speed-solving cube. This is not your generic cube that you can get for $10 at the toy store. What's the difference?
Yeah, it's confusing because there are so many tactile cubes out there, or even just plain cubes, and you don't really know what you're buying until you get plugged into the community and get your hands on several different cubes and feel the difference. So if you just search for Tactile Cube and you go to some of your search results, there's one on Amazon for $10. You might find one on Independent Living Aids or Maxi Aids that are $20 or $25. Even the Rubik's brand has now came out with a what they call the Rubik's Sensory Cube, and I think it's $25. All of those cubes are kind of clumsy, clunky, hard to turn. They lock up a little bit. You can't really customize them. You can't turn aside with a flick of the finger, which is what you really want to do if you're going to be in a competition. So you need to go to texturecube.com, which uses a good solid speed cube as a base, and they apply their own texture markings. Or you want to buy something from someplace like speedcubeshop.com or thecubicle.com, both of which sell high-end speed cubes. And the difference really is that they're much better designed on the internals, so they don't lock up as much. They turn much easier. They're lubricated very well with high-speed silicone lubricant. Some of them contain magnets so that when you flick aside to turn it, it will snap into place. They contain screws so that you can adjust the tension to make them slightly looser or slightly tighter, depending on your personal preference. There really is a huge difference between the high-end speed cube and what you would kind of find with a casual search.
Amazing. Who would have thought?
The show notes for episode 2532, which is this episode, will contain Paul's contact information along with resources about Rubik's Cubes.
That's it for today's show. Next week on Eyes on Success, we'll be talking about what's involved in moving to a new home and or a new community, about things you should consider in choosing the home and community, and things you might run into literally or figuratively after you move, and how to avoid getting hurt.
Start working on your Rubik's Cube solution now, and maybe you'll finish it by next week.
You've been listening to Eyes on Success, hosted and produced by Nancy Goodman Torpy and Peter Torpy.
You can access the full archive of previous shows, subscribe to the podcast, and much more by going to our website, www.eyesonsuccess.net. If you have questions about anything you've heard on the show or have suggestions for future shows, send an email to hosts@eyesonsuccess.net.
Thank you for listening and have a nice day.